Alright, second time's the charm. Here we go. What the 14th century plague tells us about how COVID will change politics. Nearly 700 years ago, Europe experienced the single most devastating pandemic in recorded human history within a time span of roughly 4 years, from 1347 to 1351. An outbreak of plague tread an awful path across most of the continent, claiming the lives of about half of the population. Economic activities like mining and metallurgy came to a complete stop. In some cases, villages constructed around marginal agricultural lands were entirely abandoned to be reclaimed by the forests. Kind of like the current 30 by 30 plan to do away with a bunch of agricultural land to be reclaimed by the forests. Isn't that kind of interesting? Chroniclers at the time referred to the event as the Great Mortality. The Great Reset, the Great Mortality. I don't know. Today we know it is the Black Death. Yet the legacy of the Black Death goes well beyond human suffering. The unparalleled pandemic did not just devastate the population in the areas it hit the hardest. It killed off entire social and economic institutions, especially ones that had, up until that point, restricted human freedom and stifled prosperity. In a recently published research, we trace out how the regions that experienced the worst mortality and the most extensive destruction began to look different from those that had fared better. In regions with the highest death toll, the power and social standing of workers went up precipitously, while exploitative labor practices crumbled. As a consequence, government, particularly at the local level, became significantly more democratic and inclusive, effects that could still be seen centuries later. Today, we may be witnessing the early stages of a similar development. The recent surge in workers quitting low-wage jobs, especially in the leisure and hospitality industries, has left employers scrambling to fill empty positions. Some suggest that the COVID pandemic and its fallout have, at least in the short run, augmented the bargaining power of labor. While the available evidence on this point is mixed, there has been only a modest increase in inflation-adjusted wage rates and little change to overall levels of inequality. The history of the Black Plague suggests that pandemic-driven shifts in the labor supply can have important and long-lasting economic and political ramifications. So basically this article is suggesting that the previous pandemic, the plague, made a more free society. That was the outcome of it. It's the complete opposite of what's happening in this current situation, because it seems to be a lot more about control. But yeah, it's an interesting article. A bit laughable, but we'll move on. The Amateurs invokes important questions in times of plague. Forward Theater is known for shows that not only excite audiences but explore the extent of the human condition. In the past, the trope has focused on historical, cultural, psychological topics that leave ticket holders questioning their own lives and how they live them. This year, they dazzle us with Jordan Harrison's The Amateurs. Skip ahead. So, there we go. At the start, we were transported into the future, or 2018, and greeted with a monologue from Harrison as himself about the AIDS epidemic. And just like that, the play takes on a whole new meaning. It's not just about the bubonic plague. It's about all plagues and how humans deal with them. He reveals that the biblical performance of 14th century trope was one of the first times a character recognized themselves as an individual. Individualism was bred in the times where people, specifically actors, We're keenly aware of the shortness of time. With the trials and traumas of disease, tropes like that of the amateurs began to question their reality and make decisions for themselves. This eventually developed into the Renaissance and other evolutions of artistic expression, and this occurred in all because of a crisis made people question their reality. In other words, fictional Hollis of the Black Death era is asking the same questions as us in the coronavirus pandemic. In summary, who are we and why are we here? Crisis causes humans to question their faith and presumptions and sometimes redefine themselves. It may be a stretch to say crisis is a conduit for self-definition, but based on Harrison's depiction of the Black Death and the AIDS epidemic, followed by our own experience with COVID-19, we see clear examples of this ringing true, and thanks to Forward Theater, we feel a little less alone in our search for meaning. So redefining humanity once, through the plague, but this time it's going to be on a genetic level. But I digress. Let's move on. Months after bubonic plague showed up in 6 Colorado counties, house cat tests positive. Get out of here. A house cat tested positive for the bubonic plague in Colorado at the end of October, health officials say. The positive cat was from Evergreen, less than 20 miles southwest of Denver, Jefferson County. Health officials said it's the first case of the plague in the county this year, and they believe the animal got it from the sick rodent, likely a rat. The cat tested positive on October 29th. While plague is a serious disease in cases of animal-borne disease in household pets, is never something we like to see. It is normal and expected for some animals to contract plague in Jefferson County each year. Jim Rada, the director of Environmental Health Services at Jefferson County Public Health, said in a statement, "The good news is that modern antibiotics are effective against plague, and as long as it's treated promptly, severe complications, illness, or death can be avoided." Bubonic plague is one of the 3 different types of plague, along with septemic and pneumonic. Now we need to read this part. You get the point. Bubonic plague. Peter McKnight, today's plague doctors and the psychology driving them. During the Black Death in medieval Europe, many people came to know and fear the image of the plague doctors, the second-rate physicians who replaced legitimate doctors who had died or fled. Clad in ghoulish attire replete with beak-like masks, plague doctors seldom cured patients, but earned tidy sums by counting the dead after their dubious cures failed to work. Alas, nearly 700 years later, the plague doctors are alive and well. Americans are all too familiar with America's frontline doctors, the motley crew that promotes dubious COVID-19 cures like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and opposes virtually all proven public health measures such as vaccines and masks and social distancing. Here in BC, the College of Physicians and Surgeons is currently struggling with how to handle a number of physicians who similarly reject sound medical advice in dealing with the pandemic. While many of their colleagues have spoken out about these latter-day plague doctors, few have faced any significant consequences. Now, to be fair, the medieval plague doctors didn't know what to do about the Black Death, and neither did anyone else, which is why many legitimate physicians ran away. In contrast, today's doctors have an abundance of clinical and research evidence on how to combat COVID-19, which makes their promotion of conspiracies and quack cures all the more puzzling. So yeah, pretty hilarious article. Painting the modern day resistance as plague doctors, only calling them worse because of their knowledge. Anyways, pretty laughable. Now, notice the theme yet? It's all about plagues. And I want to talk about some of the plagues. Quote unquote plagues. some legit, that have taken place in the last 2 years. We'll start with the one I remember first, which I believe was just at the very end of 2019 was when it was beginning, and that's the biblical locust plagues of 2020. Drawn to emaciated avocado drooping from a drying mother tree, Esther Davu wonders aloud if it will ever mature into the fist-sized oval fruit that keeps city residents going. Like many others at her farm in Mathiakani village in central eastern Kenya, this avocado tree has been attacked by desert locusts. With a wide sweep of her right hand, Davu counts about 10 avocado, mangoes, and papas trees that are losing their boughs after the infestation. The locust invasion that swept over farms in rural Kenya from December 2019 has left farmers like Davu not only counting crop losses, but struggling with emerging environmental and health problems. The swarms have been the worst seen in Kenya for 70 years, and experts are concerned that swarms later in the year will be even larger. Desert locusts, or Schistoscersa gregaria, have often been called the world's most devastating pest, and for good reason. Swarms form when locust numbers increase and they become crowded. This causes a switch from a relatively harmless solitary phase to a gregarious sociable phase. In this phase, the insects are able to multiply 20-fold in 3 months and reach densities of 80 million per square kilometer. Each can consume 2 grams of vegetation every day. Combined, a swarm of 80 million can consume food equivalent to that eaten by 35,000 people a day. That's crazy. In 2020, locusts have swarmed in large numbers in dozens of countries, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, Eritrea, India, Pakistan, Iran, Yemen, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. When swarms affect several countries at once in very large numbers, it is known as a plague. That's a very nicely colored looking locust there. Bright yellow. So, Davu's village, which covers about 50 square kilometers, 19 square miles, is home to about 10,000 people at Davu's 1.6 hectares or 4 acres of land. The locust swarms destroy produce worth 50,000 Kenyan shillings, which is $460 American, which she was set to begin harvesting in July. The vegetation grows at the edges of her farm, where she used to collect fodder for her livestock, was also depleted by locusts. With nothing to feed her livestock, she has moved them to neighboring village, which was spared the invasion. There she pays about 100 Kenyan shillings 93 cents every day to her hosts for her cattle to feed. The manure produced by her six cows remain with the hosts an additional payment. The toll of defense. In February 2020, local media reports the swarm covering 24,000 square kilometers was recorded in northern Kenya and could have been the largest on record in Kenya. At Davu's village, the locusts occupied about 20 square kilometers of vegetation when they swarmed. The invasion has taken its toll on mental health in the village of Mathiakani. For more than a week during the infestation, Davu's children could not go to school. They stayed home to help their parents battle the swarm that had landed on their farm. At first, adults used the tools immediately available to drum away the locusts, as well as lighting fires and burning vehicle tires, says Davu. Children were enlisted to scream at the pests to try to scare them away before the village was able to use pesticides. That drumming and screaming has left a lasting effect on her children. Most nights I do not sleep enough, says Davu. The children wake me up when they begin screaming at night. When I ask them what the problem is, they tell me that they are dreaming that another locust invasion has come to our home. I don't know, they're pretty damn happy here if this is a picture of them. Look at the gleeful. Ha ha ha. Chasing the locust. I'm going to get him. Anyway, it's pretty funny. Not really funny, but you know what I mean. That's a funny picture that they would use. Yeah, speaking of the pesticides thing, I had reported on this back, last year, or I guess no. Yeah, last year, 2020. Forgetting what year it is now, Jesus. The coronavirus pandemic, part 6, Hunger Games, part 2. And it's down this way. A story that is no longer available online, but it is documented in my article. It existed. And here's what it says about the pesticides. So there you go. Locust coronavirus crisis are threatening to drive large-scale famine in Africa. Restrictions imposed to contain coronavirus, such as border closures and lack of access to pesticides, have made the task even harder and made the situation much worse. Because if you had the chance to nip it in the bud right away and get access to the pesticides, not that I'm a pro-pesticides, I'm super against pesticides in most cases, but I mean, what are you going to do when you got that many locusts? It's crazy. I don't know of a better solution at that point. So there you go. But don't worry. The World Health Forum has a solution. Well, they don't have a solution, but they have a story on the solution. Farmers fight back, making animal feed from a locust plague. Kenya is battling some of the worst locust plagues in decades, but startup The Bug Picture hopes to transform the pest into profits and bring hope to the hopeless, whose crops and livelihoods are being destroyed by the insects. Unusual weather patterns exacerbated by climate change have created ideal conditions for surging locust numbers, which have destroyed crops and grazing grounds across East Africa and the Horn. Scientists say warmer seas are creating more rain, making dormant eggs and cyclones that disperse the swarms are getting stronger and more frequent. The Bug Picture is working with communities around the area of Laikipia, Izolo, and Samburu in central Kenya to harvest insects and mill them, turning them to protein-rich animal feed and organic fertilizer for farms. Here's a video.
Baka chamba na uwezi jua mmea na hiyo. Nafikiri nisige tu peke yake.
Kenya is battling some of the worst locust plagues in decades. They've been devouring crops and other vegetation, ruining livelihoods of local farmers. But one startup called The Bug Picture is working to bring hope by harvesting the locusts and turning them into animal feed and organic fertilizer. The idea sounds simple enough. The locusts are first harvested, then crushed, dried and milled into powder, which is then turned into protein-rich animal feed. The insects are collected at night by torchlight when they are resting on shrubs and trees. Harvesting during the day is out of the question. Albert Lemasulani is a field coordinator working for The Bug Picture.
Biological behavior of locusts is that they start roosting in the evening from 6:30 and up to 8 in the following day, 8, 9. So we normally like to have them try to start harvesting as early as 5:30 because they are sleeping, they are weak, they can't move, they can just be picked or they can shake the trees and collect. It's easier for them to collect. You can't collect locusts during the midday because they keep on flying.
Abdi Apchagai is Programs Officer at NGO Sapcone.
We are doing the crushing of the locust after collecting them from the local communities last night. And after crushing them, now they'll be dried. After drying now, they'll be taken for milling. Milling now is when now it will be processed into powder and now it will be packed. then the formulation now starts from there, where the locust powder is being added other components to form animal feed and organic fertilizer for farms.
Swarms of between 40 and 80 million locusts per square kilometre can travel up to 93 miles per day. But the insects are also protein-rich, which makes them ideal for animal feed.
Locusts apparently have like 70% of protein, so it substitutes the biggest protein, and the most expensive part of animal feed is the protein.
The Bug Project partners with local farmers to harvest the locusts. Locals receive 50 shillings or 46 US cents for every £2 collected. Between February 1st and February 18th, 2021, the project oversaw the harvest of 1.3 tonnes of locusts. Another way of controlling them is spraying locusts with pesticides before they can fly. But the chemicals can damage other insects and the environment. The bug picture is targeting swarms of 5 hectares or less in inhabited areas not suitable for spraying. But while the project offers a more sustainable approach to help farmers fight back against the locusts, the root of the problem is climate change. Scientists say warmer seas are creating more rain, waking dormant eggs. Cyclones that disperse the swarms are also getting stronger and more frequent.
Wakachamba.
Okay, let's move on.
Tired of cold calling? Introducing
Well, the mouse plague devastating regional communities in New South Wales is taking its toll, with fears it could wipe more than $1 billion from the value of winter crops. Farmers have
We can do better than that.
been forced to burn supplies of hay and grain. Food supplies have also been hit hard, with the rodents infiltrating businesses and homes. Many say the plague is relentless and showing no signs of slowing down. And CSIRO researcher Steve Henry joins me now. Morning to you. There have been a number of headlines recently suggesting Sydney will soon be invaded by mice. How likely is that to actually happen?
Oh, look, that's really unlikely. Mice only weigh about 13 grams and they've got very little legs. However, mice are present everywhere where humans are, and if there's enough resources, they build up to higher numbers, and that's exactly what's happening this year. Will we get a plague in Sydney? There's simply not enough food to support the numbers that we're seeing out west.
OK, was this plague inevitable, or could we have done something months ago?
Oh, look, the plagues tend to happen at the end of long dry periods, so 3 or 4 years of dry periods, and this season has just been exceptional in terms of it started to rain early in the spring, there was lots of food in the system, and then we've had a really mild, wet summer where mice have continued to breed through the summer and into the autumn. And even last week when I was out in Western New South Wales, there were still reports of mice breeding well into late May.
OK, so the big question, what do we do now? How do we get rid of them? There's talk of this major poison, something starting with B. People are doing buckets and peanut butter. What do you suggest?
Look, our focus is on using the tools that we have available to us now, and I've just, over the last 6 weeks, done 30 presentations across regional New South Wales, talking to farmers about the best way to protect their winter crop as they sow it. We've just got approval from the APVMA to release a double-strength zinc phosphide, which we are really hopeful will make a big difference to farmers as they sow the crop, and we're really getting them ready to bait in the spring at the end of the winter as soon as they start to see the signs of damage.
OK, Steve Henry, thank you for your time.
Remember the mouse plague. Australia's plague of mice is devastating and could get a lot worse. This is from June 21st, 2021. Australia's southern eastern agricultural regions are deep in the thick of months-long plague of mice that has destroyed crops and overwhelmed farmers. The infestation comes after years of drought, devastating wildfires, and a period of heavy rain that boosted plant growth, creating ideal conditions for the hungry rodents to reproduce exponentially. Now farms and fields are overrun with swarms of mice that have taken up residence in the walls, barns, and homes. Mice first appeared in Australia when the arrival of British colonists in 1788. These days, the continent sees populations boom and die off every few years, but many farmers say this infestation is the worst they have ever seen, and there is no sign that it is letting up soon. The prolonged rain and the bumper crop of food means that the rodents have lots to eat for a very long time, says Stephen Bellarmine, an ecologist at the Natural Resources Institute in the University of Greenwich in England, who studies rodents' roles as agricultural pests and disease vectors. Scientific American spoke with Bellarmine about how climate change has influenced infestation in Australia, whether other parts of the world could see similar outbreaks, and if the present could lead to the spread of illness. We're not going to get into that. But there is something interesting. Let's go back to this video. I have something else to share. There's a video by a dude called Enter the Stars, and whether you're familiar with him or not, I'm not going to watch the whole video. We're just going to get to the... He does a little breakdown of the movie Cats and Dogs, and there's a very interesting part in this movie that I had to point out to him, because I'm not sure he was aware of the mouse plague that was taking place in Australia. It's near the end, I believe. Here we go.
Mice! The unlikeliest of allies. Thousands of you covered in concentrated dog allergy. And you will be given your much-deserved reward.
In the continent of Australia!
You will make your way across the nation. Half of you will infiltrate homes, infecting every human in sight. While the other half, and with the dogs out of the way, cats will overthrow the humans.
And the continent of Australia!
Out to steal the little guy's eye.
So yeah, the continent of Australia. What? Thought that was very interesting. Actually makes me want to see if there's any more explanation, because I haven't seen the movie to know exactly the point of that. There we got what we wanted. Okay. Oops, I didn't want that. I didn't mean to click that. Take me back. Can I just like have the link to it? No? That's too hard? I have to go here. 2001 film. Interesting. Let's see the part about... No. All right. So a factory where mice are being prepared to spread a mass-produced allergy. Okay. Interesting. Alright. Just had to look that up. Next plague. This is one I've reported on before in the video 17. Plague of Brood X zombie cicadas set to hit northeastern U.S. February 26 of 2021. In that day, Hashem will whistle to the flies at the end of the water channels of Egypt and to the bees in the land of Assyria. Isaiah 7:18. Isaiah said, okay. The Israel Bible. Millions of winged cicadas are set to emerge from their 17-year slumber just under the surface of the soil in the northeastern U.S. Though not as destructive as the biblical plague of locusts, the cicadas will be deafening, and many will be carrying a psychoactive mold that eats their bodies away while leaving them barely alive. There are two types of cicadas: annual and periodical cicadas. Annual cicadas emerge in July and last into September. They are fast-moving, greenish in color. Periodical cicadas, like those in Brood X, appear every 13 to 17 years from May to June. They are red-eyed, sluggish, and emerge by the millions. The magic cicada, the Magi cicada, species of cicada native to the northeastern United States, has a 17-year cycle, spending almost the full length of their long lives underground, feeding on xylem fluids from the roots of deciduous forest trees in the eastern United States. In the spring of their 13th or 17th year, mature cicada nymphs emerge in the springtime at any given locality, synchronously and in tremendous numbers. Experts estimate that some areas will see as many as 1.5 million cicadas per acre. After the prolonged developmental phase, the adults are active for only about 4 to 6 weeks. The males aggregate into chorus centers and treetops and attract mates. Mated females lay eggs in the stems of woody plants. Within 2 months of the original emergence, the life cycle is complete, and the adult cicadas disappear for another 17 years. The spring, when the temperature... Okay, we're not going to read that. Last year, Brood 9 emerged from underground in Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina. Cicadas are not harmful, and though they can damage fruits and orchards, they not destructively voracious like locusts, but they are known for being exceptionally musical, especially when in throes of their once every 17-year romantic endeavors. The chorus of crooning cicadas has been described as deafening. So let's get to the mold part, the fungus part. Oops, not that fast. Casson and his colleagues have been studying a fungus called Massospora. I think it's Massospora that is infecting the cicadas after they emerge from the ground. The fungus essentially eats away the entire back half of the cicada and grows in its place. Casson compares this fungal growth to a chalky gumdrop on the back of the cicada. Even though half of their body is missing, fungus-infected cicada don't die and actually stay alive. The fungus contains chemicals such as those found in hallucinogenic mushrooms. The chemicals cause the infected cicadas to trick other cicadas in order to facilitate the spread of the fungus, manipulating male cicadas into flicking their wings like females, a mating invitation which tempts unsuspecting male cicadas and infects them. The research, Behavioral Betrayal, How Select Fungal Parasites Enlist Living Insects to Do Their Bidding, was published in the journal PLOS Pathogens. That process where the fungus replaces the back half of the body is really why we call these zombie cicadas, said Brian Lovett, a postdoctoral researcher at WVU. In true horror fashion, Massospora spores gnaw away at the cicada's genitals, butt, and abdomen. replacing them with fungal spores. Then they wear away like an eraser on a pencil, Lovett says. So, yeah, manipulates the mate to do its bidding. Transmit the spores. Even though infected cicadas lose their ability to mate, when their hindquarters are replaced by the fungus, they will still attempt to mate. And they've got a hypersexual behavior. In the summer, when cicadas emerge, a couple of weeks later, zombie cicadas are going to be outside of your door. Bizarre infection sound as bizarre as the infection sounds, it's generally harmless to humans and cicadas alike. The insects reproduce at such a rate that the fungus extermination of hordes of cicadas has little effect on their overall population. The evasion of the zombie cicadas will be bothersome and noisy, but it will not be remotely as destructive as an infestation of locusts that hit Egypt before the Exodus. Notwithstanding the image of millions of winged insects crawling through the forests of the northeastern U.S. may give a hint of what can be expected at the end of days. According to Jewish tradition, the 10 plagues will reappear before the Messiah. Rabbi Yosef Berger, the rabbi of King David's tomb on Mount Zion, explained this aspect of the messianic process to Israel 365 News, quoting the prophet Micah. Excuse me. I will show him wondrous deeds as in the days when he sallied forth from the land of Egypt. Micah 7:15. Okay. So yeah, pretty interesting, especially with the creepy biblical stuff at the end there. So you had your mouse plague, and now you have your off the scales venomous snake invasion hits Australia as fat serpents are lured into homes by devastating mouse plague. Hungry serpents are being lured into the homes across the country thanks to this year's devastating mouse plague. The extra large beasts are hiding in gardens, bins, garages across New South Wales. They have also been found slithering among piles of firewood, concrete blocks, and rubber. It's only the beginning of the dreaded snake season, which started last month, and catchers have already removed scores of serpents. Sean Cade, owner of Australian Snake Catchers, removed an extra-large 6-foot eastern brown snake from a Western Sydney home at the beginning of October, and since then the expert has caught more than a dozen 5-foot deadly eastern brown snakes and upward of 25 red bellies. We're definitely seeing bigger ones coming out. They're bigger than average and a lot healthier. So, yeah. He explained snake season normally starts in mid-September and runs until March, coinciding with Australia's summer, but this year's stint has been accelerated by the horrifying mouse plague, which tormented much of eastern and southern parts of the country earlier this year, according to experts. Tens of millions of rampaging mice sparked horrific outbreaks stretching 1,000 kilometers from Brisbane to Melbourne. Farmers were forced to torch their cars and crops, while other Aussies were told to tie string around their trousers to stop scurrying rodents running up their legs. One woman even woke up to a mouse chewing on her eyeball as the rodent infestation destroyed everything in its wake. Yuck. Well, anyways, you get the point. We're not going to see a plague of snakes. Whether there will be second wave of the mouse plagues remains uncertain. Gotcha, Chief. You like that plague? You want some more plague? Come on. Give some more plague. Plague. Refresh the plague. What's happening? Where's my plague? There we go. Well, last time I tried to play this video, it was really, the quality is much better. Okay, if the quality stays like this, we can watch it. It's not that good. This isn't actually a plague. I don't know why they're calling it a plague. This is just the natural migration of crabs. They even built bridges for them. You get it. Wait. I see them a little bit more. Crawl up there. Wow. They're kind of mesmerizing. Wow. They look like angry tomatoes with claws to me. Look at their angry tomato faces. Creepy crawlers, horror moment, biblical plague of 50 million cannibal crabs shut down roads as they head to breeding ground. What a clickbaity title if I've ever saw one. And yeah, it got me, but whatever. I was looking for plague stuff. Unbelievable footage shows the bright red creatures descending on townships, what is considered one of the greatest animal migrations on the planet. Every year, an estimated 50 million crabs make their way from the forests after rainfall in October or November and head to the ocean to mate. The crabs generally eat leaves, fruits, flowers, and seeds, but have a dark side that sees them eat their young. The crab's cannibal side comes out when babies returning from their first ocean migration are feasted on by adults as part of their diet. Their journey takes them through residential areas and tourist hotspots through the winter months. Photos and videos shared by Parks Australia showed thousands upon thousands of crabs scurrying across roads and specially constructed bridges. The animals also turned up at the door of an office block, the organization reported. Residents of the Drum Site settlement in the northeast were trapped in their homes on Sunday due to the sheer number of the roads on the roads. So yeah. Spokesman for Parks Australia, which looks after the county's green spaces, said with red crab migration in full swing on Christmas Island, the crabs are turning up everywhere, including at the door of an office block. World-renowned naturalist Sir David Attenborough described the red crab migration as like a great scarlet curtain moving down the cliffs and rocks towards the sea, and considered filming the spectacle as one of the 10 greatest TV moments. This article goes way longer than I thought. I didn't even read it all. Anyways, it's clickbait about plague stuff. Still, the crabs are fun to watch. Anyways, it's about the plague language, not so much whether it's legitimately a plague, because, you know, a lot of these things, they talk plague stuff, but it's pretty routine things. Except for the locust, I would call that one a plague, because that's pretty bad. But, I mean, the cicadas, that's every year. Or not yet. Well, they have their different broods each year. Still, it's pretty routine and whatnot, so yeah. So, but this is interesting. Here, it's scorpion plague in 2021. What's happening in Egypt? From a day ago. It's raining deadly scorpions and snakes in Egypt. Yes, scorpions, the same creatures you probably saw in the 1997 film The Mummy. Random plug. Thanks for the Mummy plug. I mean, I've seen scorpions in other places, not just The Mummy. Scorpions on rampage in Egypt are called death stalkers, just for your information. The creatures were washed out of their desert burrows and into residential areas after heavy hailstorm and flash flooding in the southern Egyptian city of Aswan over the weekend, but the snakes are the least worries for the residents. Over 500 people were hospitalized following scorpion bites in just one night. Catch a little bit of that weather action. Get it? You got it. Earlier, it was reported that 3 people died due to scorpion stings, but the acting health minister clarified that no such deaths took place. Egypt is home to the world's most Deadly scorpions, 24 species in all. Some of those scorpions can kill an adult in just an hour without medical aid. In Egyptian mythology, too, scorpions find a prominent place. The Egyptian goddess of healing and magic, Isis, is saved by 7 scorpions. Now this is the 21st century, and scorpions don't have much respect for non-gods, and Egypt is understanding its sting by sting. Netizens are flabbergasted, but scorpions are nothing new for the residents of Aswan, though the 500 plus stings in a night are. I thought this was interesting. The girl kind of looks like Greta, which is creepy. What if, hear me out because I'm an absolute heathen, the plagues of Egypt in the Bible were just signs of impending catastrophic climate change? A plague of scorpions is killing folks in Egypt right now, the center of the creation of humanity. Plagues starting. Maybe I'm crazy. Some drew parallels to the biblical story from the book of Exodus. The story describes 10 plagues which befell ancient Egypt in the curse of Moses, the god of Israel, when the Pharaoh refused to free enslaved Israelites. So someone posted a handy guide to the 10 plagues. Let's read them out. Number 1, plague of blood. In this plague, the Nile turns into a river of blood, killing all her marine life and making the water undrinkable. Villagers suffer without their main source of water. Number 2, plague of frogs. The second plague to befall ancient Egypt was frogs. Egyptian cities brimmed with frogs emerging out of water bodies and plaguing the houses, beds, and even kitchens. Number 3, plague of gnats. Gnats, small-winged insects, infested the towns of ancient Egypt in the third plague. Some also describe the insects as lice or other small insects. The insects covered towns and people like dust covering the swaths of land. Number 4, plague of flies. Then came the plagues of flies covering the land, the people and the Pharaoh and his officials. Number 5, plague of the livestock. Moses brought upon the plagues of the livestock, where animals like donkeys, horses, sheep, hens, pigs, etc. died due to various diseases. However, the curse distinguished between the livestock of the Egyptians and the Israelis, leaving the latter unharmed. Now, we're definitely going to see, livestock going down due to, avian flu scares and whatnot, because they've been telegraphing that for a long time. Cows. Oh, sorry. I was reading the GIF, whatever the stupid GIF thing that's not popping up. Number 6, plague of boils. Moses cured Egyptians and the officials of the Pharaoh with boils all over their body. Officials couldn't bear to stand in front of Moses due to the disease of boils. Now, with the bubonic plague, what do you get? Boils. So, there's your plague stuff there. Number 7, plague of hail or fire. When the Pharaoh still refused to let go of the enslaved Israelis after 6 plagues, Moses sent the worst ever hailstorm to Egypt. Moses said every man and animal will not find shelter from the hailstorm and die in the fields. Wonder if Egypt is currently being plagued by the 7th plague once again, 2021. Just in, a terrifying scene in Egypt. Thunderstorms, scorpions, and snakes. So... there's legit hail action there. No snakes or scorpions to be seen. Number 8, plague of locusts. The god of Israel brought a swarm of locusts upon Egypt to eat out whatever little trees and fields were left out from the hailstorm. When the modern world isn't too familiar with the swarm of locusts, remember NCR 2020? I don't know what this is a reference to. I don't know what NCR 2020 is. So if you know, let me know in the comments. Curious what that is. Number 9, darkness for 3 days. After all the death and destruction, ancient Egypt was cursed with the pitch-black darkness, which could be felt. No one could move from their place for 3 days, and no one could see anything around them. That is something I think we'll be having, a plague of darkness when all the power goes out, because that's going to happen. They've been telling us it's going to happen. They're going to take our power away. 10, death of the firstborn. Moses finally cursed Egyptians with the death of their firstborn child, from that of the pharaohs who sat on the throne to that of the calf of a cattle. Anyway, that was mythology with a sprinkling of history. Scholar says 9 of the 10 plagues for natural disasters, except for the plague number 10. And plague number 10, is something I think is basically what we're about to see with the you know what to all the pregnant ladies out there. Moving on. So, with all the plague talk, I thought it'd be appropriate to once again display to you The Economist's 2019 cover, which I had the picture up, but now it needs to load for some reason. Come on now. Come on. No? If I refresh you. Oh wait, no, I clicked the wrong one. Good job. Okay. This is a good use of time right now. Oh man. Let's come back to that. Actually, no, because it's actually... Okay, there we go. I scared it into popping up. So, I've pointed this out many times, and it looks like someone else finally caught on and has pointed it out themselves. So, thank you to whoever did that, because now it saves me time. We have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We've got the death, famine, war, and conquest. The war one is the Statue of Liberty, and she's wearing a face mask. Isn't that just dandy? Go over to here. So our 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, often referred to as the 4 horsemen, are figures in the Christian religion appearing in the New Testament final book, Revelation, and Apocalypse written by John of Patmos, as well as the Old Testament prophetic book of Zechariah, and in the book of Ezekiel, where they are named as punishments from God. Revelation 6 tells of the book scroll in God's right hand that is sealed with 7 seals. The Lamb of God, Lion of Judah, opens the first 4 of 7 seals, which summons 4 beings that ride out white, red, black, and pale horses. Zechariah describes them as the ones whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth, causing it to rest quietly. Ezekiel lists them as a sword, famine, wild beasts, and plague. Wild beasts, you say? Like, I don't know. I don't know why it just popped in my head, Chimera, the Chimera breed. I just think of them, I don't know. They would be wild, wouldn't they? In John's Revelation, the first horseman rides on a white horse, carries a bow, and is given a crown. He rides forward as a figure of conquest, perhaps invoking pestilence. Christ and the Antichrist. The second carries a sword and rides a red horse, and the creator of war. The third, a food merchant riding upon a black horse, symbolizes famine. That's next. He carries the scales. The fourth and final horse is pale, and upon it rides death, accompanied by Hades. They were given authority over a quarter of the earth to kill with sword, famine, plague, and by means of the beasts of the earth. So, I don't know. The elites think they're the 4 horsemen now, so let's move on. So, I caught this, I believe, yesterday. FBI investigating vials labeled smallpox found near lab in Philadelphia. What? Washington, the FBI and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are investigating questionable vials labeled smallpox and found in a freezer last night at a Merck facility outside Philadelphia, according to alerts sent to Department of Homeland Security leadership on Tuesday night. There were reportedly a total of 15 questionable vials, according to the unclassified for official use only alert. A copy of which was obtained by Yahoo News. 5 of the vials were labeled as smallpox and 10 were labeled as vaccinia. The vials were secured immediately. The discovery of the vials prompted a lockdown of the facility, which had since been lifted. The FBI and CDC launched investigations which remain ongoing. There is no indication that anyone has been exposed to the small number of frozen vials. The frozen vials labeled smallpox were incidentally discovered by a laboratory worker while cleaning out a freezer in a facility that conducts vaccine research in Pennsylvania, a CDC spokesman told Yahoo News. CDC, its administration partners and law enforcement are investigating the matter, and the vials' contents appear intact. Laboratory workers who discovered the vials was wearing gloves and a face mask. We will provide further details. They are available, spokesman said. Smallpox, a disease caused by the variola virus, is considered so deadly that only 2 labs in the world are authorized to store samples of the virus, including one in Russia and the other in the CDC. At the CDC in Atlanta. Scientists have debated for years whether to destroy any remaining... Yes, destroy them! No, it doesn't really matter because they can just reproduce it synthetically. But anyways, citing the dangers of the mishap that it could unleash a disease that has been eradicated since the 1970s, those in favor of keeping samples are argued they are needed to develop new vaccines in response to a new outbreak. Yes, the new outbreak. Majority of Americans are not vaccinated against smallpox, and those who were vaccinated would likely now have waning immunity. The CDC will arrive on site tomorrow to take custody of the vials and transport them to another facility for testing. The alert notes, no personnel were reportedly exposed to the materials. It just repeats itself after that. So, yeah, there you go. Isn't that funny that this happened shortly after Billy Goat Gates rehatched his smallpox threat. Oh, did I say threat? I meant warning.
And are we doing things now, or rather are we not doing things now that we really need to be doing in preparation for the next pandemic?
Yeah, so it's 2015 that I gave the TED Talk and wrote a number of papers titled "We're Not Ready for the Next Pandemic." And sadly, that was a better forecast of what would happen than anyone would have wished for. You know, the economic damage, the deaths, it's been completely horrific. And I would expect that will lead the R&D budgets to be focused on things we didn't have today. You know, we didn't have vaccines that block transmission. We got vaccines that help you with your health, but they only slightly reduce the transmissions. We need a new way of doing the vaccines. We didn't get much in the way of therapeutics. Dexamethasone and now molnupiravir could help, but way less than should have been the case. We didn't get the diagnostics up and running in order to, achieve what at least Australia and New Zealand showed, that competent management could keep the death rate down pretty dramatically. And so I'm hoping in 5 years I can write a book called, We Are Ready for the Next Pandemic. But it'll take tens of billions in R&D that the US and the UK will be part of that. It'll take probably about $1 billion a year for a pandemic task force at the WHO level, which is doing the surveillance and actually doing what I call germ games, where you practice. You say, okay, what if a bioterrorist brought smallpox to 10 airports? How would the world respond to that? That there's naturally caused epidemics and bioterrorism caused epidemics that could even be way worse than what we experience today. And yet the advances in medical science should give us tools that we could do dramatically better. So you'd think this would be a priority. The next year will be where those allocations have to get made, including this global pandemic task force. The nice thing is a lot of the R&D we need to do to be ready for the next pandemic are things like making vaccines cheap, having big factories, eradicating the flu, getting rid of the common cold, making vaccines just a little patch you put on your arm, things that will be incredibly beneficial even in the years when we don't have pandemics. So, along with the climate message and the ongoing fight against disease of the poor, the pandemic preparedness is something I'll be talking about a lot. And I think it'll find fertile ground because, we lost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. And, citizens expect their governments not to let that happen again.
So yeah, Billy Goat Gates once again warns us with smallpox. But he's done it many times before, and if you wish to see him, I have let me see his other times. I have a video called "The Next Disaster" from 7 months ago, where it's a collage of a bunch of his clips of him saying that. So go check that out there. Let's move on. CDC. Prevention and treatment. There are vaccines to protect people from smallpox. Currently, smallpox vaccines are not recommended for the general public because smallpox has been eradicated. If there were a smallpox outbreak, health officials would use smallpox vaccines to control it. While some antiviral drugs may help treat smallpox disease, there is no treatment for smallpox that has been tested in people who are sick with the disease and proven effective. Smallpox vaccines. Smallpox can be prevented by smallpox vaccines, also called Vaccinia virus vaccines. The vaccines are made from the virus called Vaccinia, which is a pox virus similar to smallpox but less harmful. There are 2 licensed smallpox vaccines in the United States and 1 investigational vaccine that may be used in smallpox emergency. The replication competent smallpox vaccines AdCam 2000 and APSV can protect people from getting sick or make the disease less severe if they receive the vaccine either before or within a week of coming in contact with smallpox virus. If you get the vaccine before contact with the virus, the vaccine can protect you from getting sick. Within 3 days of being exposed to the virus, the vaccine might protect you from getting the disease. If you still get the disease, you might get much less sick than an unvaccinated person would. Within 4 to 7 days of being exposed to the virus, the vaccine likely gives you some protection from the disease. If you still get the disease, you might not get sick as an unvaccinated person would. Wow, doesn't this sound very similar to the whole narrative that we're seeing right now? Once you have developed the smallpox rash, the vaccine will not protect you. Currently, smallpox vaccines are not available to the general public because smallpox has been eradicated and the virus no longer exists in nature. However, there is enough smallpox vaccine to vaccinate every person in the United States if a smallpox outbreak were to occur. So some of the drugs in 2018, July of 2018 that is, the FDA approved tocovirimat or TPOXX for treatment of smallpox. In laboratory tests, tocovirimat, I'm just going to call it TPOXX. TPOXX has been shown to stop the growth of the virus that causes smallpox and to be effective in treating animals that had diseases similar to smallpox. TPOXX has not been tested in people who are sick with smallpox, but has been given to healthy people. Test results in healthy people showed that it is safe and causes only minor side effects. In addition to the treating smallpox diseases, TPOXX could also be used under investigational new drug protocol to treat adverse reactions from Vaccinia virus vaccination. In June 2021, the FDA approved brincidofovir, or Tembexa, I'm going to call it Tembexa, for treatment of smallpox in laboratory tests. Tembexa has been shown to stop the growth of the virus that causes smallpox and to be effective in treating animals that had diseases similar to smallpox. Tembexa has not been tested in people who are sick with smallpox, but has been given healthy people and people with other viral infections. Test results in people who have received Tembexa for bone marrow transplant showed the most common side effects were diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. In laboratory tests, cidofovir has also been shown to stop the growth of the virus that causes smallpox and to be effective in treating animals that had similar diseases similar to smallpox. Cidofovir has not been tested in people, yada yada yada. Drug continues to be evaluated for effectiveness and toxicity. Cidofovir is not FDA approved for the treatment of variola virus infections, but could be used during an outbreak under an appropriate regulatory mechanism such as investigational new drug protocol or emergency use authorization. Because these drugs were not tested in people with smallpox, it is not known if a person with smallpox would benefit from treatment with them. However, their use may be considered if there is ever a smallpox outbreak. TPOXX and Cidofovir are currently stockpiled by Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response ASPR Strategic National Stockpile, which has medicine and medical supplies to protect the American public if there is a public health emergency, including one involving smallpox. So there you go. More recent drugs being approved. Interesting timing. Speaking of stockpile, Trump official in charge of national stockpile bet big on smallpox and anthrax, cut infectious disease funds, May 5th of 2020. Had the U.S. been attacked by anthrax or weaponized smallpox, Robert Kadlec would have looked prescient. Instead, the U.S. and the world got a deadly new coronavirus in the U.S. Strategic National Stockpile, which Kadlec overseas was unprepared, the Washington Post reports. Kadlec, a longtime biodefense expert, was confirmed as head of the Health and Human Service Department's Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, ASPR. In August 2017, he immediately began to shifting his office's focus to biological attacks, intentional attacks, terrorist attacks, and definitely away from natural disease outbreaks, a former official told the Post. HHS transferred control of the national stockpile to ASPR from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2018 over the objections of some national security and health public officials. Kadlec streamlined the process for purchasing supplies for the stockpile, diminishing the role of government experts and restricting decision-making to himself and a small circle of advisors. The Post reports he oversaw a $2.8 billion 10-year contract for smallpox vaccines at double the cost per dose with a former client, Emergent Biosolutions, a relationship he did not mention on his extended disclosure forms, and ramped up purchases of anthrax vaccines. At the same time, ASPR slashed planned funding for pandemic flu and infectious diseases preparedness, including halting an Obama-era initiative to spend $35 million to build a machine that could produce 1.5 million N95 masks per day, the Post reports, after HHS Secretary Alex Azar assigned him to lead the department's coronavirus response in March. Kadlec's office assigned contracts for $2.3 billion worth of ventilators and $468 million for masks, including $62.3 million from O&M Hallard, the contractor whose rapid mask machine Kadlec axed in 2018. Kadlec told the Post he's proud of his decades to government service, including his efforts to centralize authority at ASPR, and his actions are consistent with his long-time views on biodefense. Quite frankly, Mother Nature is not thinking enemy intent on inflicting grievous harm to our country, killing our citizens, undermining our government, or destroying our way of life, Kadlec told Congress in 2011. Mother Nature doesn't develop highly virulent organisms that are resistant to our current stockpiles of antibodies. Yes, thank you, Mr. Kadlec. In March, he told a House committee in his office did not consider a situation like this today, with respirators being our first and only line of defense for health care workers. Now, I remember when they were bitching about how Trump axed funding to fight infectious diseases and stuff like that. Well, the bigger story is what they were putting the money into, which is the biological warfare stuff, basically, the biological terrorism. That was the bigger story, but that got overshadowed by, Trump, and he's cutting funding in the pandemic and blah blah blah. But yeah, soon they'll all find out. Now, just to point out that they can make smallpox from scratch in a lab, scientists warned. This is from 2017, Live Science. Scientists have recreated a relative of the smallpox virus in the lab from scratch. The virus, called the horsepox virus, is not harmful to humans, but the new findings suggest it's possible for people to make a deadly smallpox virus in the lab. The virus was eradicated from the world in 1980, according to the journal Science. Recreating the horsepox virus wasn't a trivial feat, but it did not require extensive resources either. The researchers ordered the DNA fragments they used to make the virus from a company that makes DNA pieces for researchers with made-to-order sequences and sends them through the mail. In total, the project cost $100,000 and took 6 months, Science reported. It's certainly cheaper now, since that was 2017 that this came out. The researchers from the University of Alberta in Canada hope their effort could one day lead to better smallpox vaccine. Although most people no longer receive smallpox vaccination, the shot is sometimes given to people who may be at risk for contracting the disease, such as those who work with smallpox or similar viruses in a lab. Small percentages of those vaccinated with the current vaccine may experience serious life-threatening side effects, according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. Oops. Canadian researchers are working with the pharmaceutical company Tonix to develop a smallpox vaccine. In March, Tonix issued a statement announcing that it had used the horsepox virus to develop a potential smallpox vaccine, which showed protective effects in an early study in mice. Yada. Let's move on. Speaking of weaponized smallpox, yes, I wish to proceed. This inexplicably re-uploaded a month ago by the Centers for Health Security is the Dark Winter exercise from 2001 of June. Why? Why'd they do that? There wasn't no like pandemic awareness month or biological terrorism awareness month. It just inexplicably just uploaded it 6 days before the Hunter's Moon. Interesting enough. But yeah, we'll let it a little bit play.
Good evening. We interrupt our regular programming to return to Southwest Medical Center and continuing coverage of the outbreak of a mystery sickness. Earlier today, hospital officials said they were admitting patients with symptoms that seemed to be severe adult chickenpox. But now we have new information. We go to Andy Field outside Southwest Medical Center. Good evening, Andy. What can you tell us?
Sheila, we've been moved to an isolated area behind the hospital. And off the record, doctors here suspect that at least 5 patients hospitalized at Southwest may have smallpox. Now, for those of us who don't remember the disease, it is a deadly virus. We haven't seen it in this country in at least 20 years. Now, if this proves to be true, we could have a very serious health emergency on our hands. But officially, the hospital will not confirm or deny that diagnosis.
So yeah, it goes on, and this is just what the horrors of having the smallpox look like. Very, very disturbing. Let's move on. Here's another article about not just synthetic biology. This is 2014. The FDA had been using... Oh, sorry, I should read the headline. A scientist from the Food and Drug Administration went inside room 3C16, a cold storage area at the National Institute of Health Labs in Bethesda, Maryland. The FDA had been using the space since the early 1990s to store samples for biological research, but had been cleaning it out in preparation for a move to a nearby campus in Silver Spring. The scientists who entered saw 12 mysterious cardboard boxes on a crowded shelf in the far left corner of the storage space and pried one open to see what it contained. Inside, dozens of long vials were packed in rolls of white cotton and sealed with melted glass. Many of the labels were worn to the point of illegibility. I can't read the word. The scientists noticed one vessel that held some loose freeze-dried material. Its label bore a single decipherable word: variola, another word for smallpox, a disease that the 19th century British historian Thomas Babington Macaulay deemed the most terrible of all the ministers of death. The highly contagious virus spreads through close contact, bodily fluids, and contaminated objects. It starts like a chicken pox. The victim runs a high fever, is prone to vomiting. A rash develops in the mouth and spreads quickly over the entire body like tiny marbles pushing up from under the skin. Some 30% of people who contract the virus die within 2 weeks. Those who survive are often scarred, blinded, and disfigured. Ugh. Yeah. Smallpox ravaged the world for centuries. It wasn't until 1796 that English physician Edward Jenner famously discovered how to turn the immune system against the disease. Even so, it took centuries for the vaccine he created to fully be deployed. Smallpox killed an estimated 500 million people in the 19th and 20th centuries before it was finally eradicated worldwide in 1980. Yet here in this cluttered Maryland lab were six forgotten vials of the dreaded pox virus, including at least 2 live samples still capable of growing and infecting untold masses. During a 2-year investigation into the origin of the vials, the FDA determined that they dated to February 10th, 1954, but the agency couldn't figure out how or why they ended up in the cold storage room in the NIH. The incident triggered a government-wide search for other dangerous materials that may have been overlooked and led to revisions in the FDA's policies of the storage of infectious agents. The 60-year-old smallpox strains were destroyed under the watch of the World Health Organization officials. Yeah, right. But anyways, just kind of find it funny. We're getting the same kind of story, same kind of thing, rehatched. So is it total BS? Or are they just prepping us? I think it's the latter, probably. I have to refresh this one again. Speaking of pox, remember the monkeypox? Deadly monkeypox infection confirmed in Maryland months after 200 people in the U.S. monitored during feared outbreak. This is from yesterday. Case of deadly viral infection, monkeypox, has been confirmed in a Maryland resident who recently traveled back to the U.S. from Nigeria. The man who had not been named currently had only minor symptoms, the Maryland Health Department said in a news release. So this isn't even a news story. They just reissued it because I reported this exact same story. Let's see. Let's go back. Not this one. On my main channel. When did I cover this? Wait, did I pass it? Where is it? Oh, there it is. 3 months ago. I reported this 3 months ago. Anyways, very annoying. Just had to have it in the news. Just rehatch it. Whenever they're rehatching something, just to have it in the feed, it's telling you that something's coming. Something bad is coming. Now, some more predictive programming. Here's a video clip I also have on my channel, the I'm Ralph channel. If it'll load.
What you're looking at is the smallpox virus, one of the deadliest pathogens on the planet. For centuries, it did a wonderful job of helping keep the human population in check. But times change, and sometimes Mother Nature needs a hand in improving her creations. Like, say, speeding them up a little bit, making them contagious when they should be quietly incubating in a host, or making them more lethal. I didn't come up with the approach on my own. My friend Vitaly's one of the pioneers in the field, and the idea has been around for years. Genome as data. You see,
my apologies, it's giving us trouble. Come on. Come on. There you go.
I didn't come up with the approach on my own. My friend Vitaly's one of the pioneers in the field, and the idea has been around for years. Genome as data. You see, once we digitized DNA, we made it infinitely mutable. We could do 1,000 virtual variations in the time it used to take to grow a 1 lab grade generation of pathogens. And we could pick the best, most lethal combinations and make them real. That's how you make a killer virus, you see. Mix in genetic code from other diseases, and you move the sliders all the way up on lethality and virulence. The goal was a 90% mortality rate. I'm not sure my green poison is going to quite hit that, but honestly, that's just details. As long as most of humanity goes, the Earth stands a fighting chance. Technically, technology is what's killing the planet. But that's not really the case. It's the greed that drives the technology. But a funny thing happened on the way to $100 genome maps and 3D printed plastic toys. Someone figured out those technologies could be repurposed, modified for the greater good. Me. Now, my virus is going to do what nature's always done. Decide who lives and who dies. And if nature decides I die, then I die. If nothing else, I'll have a lot of company. Natural selection at its finest, helped along by a little unnatural genetic manipulation. It's all data, really. Life's just a method of processing it. The same way I processed the smallpox genome on my laptop. And who's to say that wasn't the plan all along? If, by some miracle, you survive green poison, then nature's decided you deserve to live. The rest of us shouldn't and won't. Godspeed. I'll see you in hell.
I'll see you in hell. There you go. That was from Tom Clancy's Division, released in 2016. Oh, look. 330 million globally. 33. Fantastic. Well, there you go. It's funny they call it the green poison. Anyways. Just about ready to wrap it up. Now, with all that doom and gloom, how about a little bit of hope? This is an article about a rediscovered Native American remedy that kills pox virus. Now, before YouTube goes getting ready to hit that flag button, this is for an article about a study that is peer-reviewed on the PLOS 1 site, and you can take it up with them if you have any issues with what I read here, so suck it. This is from 2012. Herbal medicine used to treat smallpox in the 19th century found to halt viral replication in vitro. An old herbal remedy for treating smallpox that is thought to have been used by the Native Americans in the late 1800s has been rediscovered and found to kill the pox virus. Smallpox has been eradicated, but the findings offers a possible treatment for pox virus in the unlikely event of a bioterror attack or increased incidence of similar pox viruses such as monkeypox. Smallpox ravaged human populations for thousands of years, but in 1796, Edward Jenner discovered its exposure. And there we go. So there's the pitcher plant. An extract from the pitcher plant, Sarracenia purpurea, halted viral replication. Historical sources suggest that the 1800s, when smallpox still posed as a serious threat, the Mi'kmaq and Native Americans of Nova Scotia treated the disease using a botanical infusion derived from the insectivorous plant Sarracenia purpurea, a species of pitcher plant. Now Jeffrey Langland at Arizona State University in Tempe, U.S., and colleagues have conducted in vitro experiments with the herbal extract and found it inhibits replication of variola virus, the causative agent behind smallpox. Although natural smallpox no longer poses a health threat, there is a remote possibility that unstable states or terrorist groups could have acquired stock of the virus following the collapse of the Soviet Union, which had developed smallpox as a biological warfare agent. Vaccinations are still administered to a risk group, including researchers working with pox viruses and members of the U.S. military who could potentially be exposed to the virus through biological warfare, but since the risk is so low for populations at large, it's hard to justify vaccinating everyone, particularly because the vaccine can have serious side effects. Developing therapies in there is therefore important in order to treat people if a bioterror event does occur. There is much skepticism on herbal medicine, but what our results illustrate conclusively is that this herb is able to kill the virus, and we can actually demonstrate how it kills the virus, says Langland. It takes the herb out of the realm of folklore and into the area of true scientific evidence, YouTube. The team made extracts of S. purpurea and found that it was highly effective at inhibiting the replication of the virus in rabbit kidney cells. They then looked at the replication cycle of the virus and found that the herb inhibits mRNA synthesis, halting reproduction of proteins vital for replication. Other drugs are being developed against smallpox, but S. purpurea is the only known therapy that will target the virus at the point in its replication cycle, says Langley. The extract blocks early transcription, appearing to have a distinct mechanism of action from that of two other antivirals currently in clinical trials, says Mark Buller, a virologist at St. Louis University, Missouri, U.S. The results are very compelling and support the need to further evaluate the purified active ingredient in small animal studies. With smallpox, it is obviously impossible to see if the herb is effective in the human body unless a bioterror release of the virus occurs, says Langland. We are in the process of doing animal studies to confirm our results in at least this type of whole animal system. So yeah, interesting stuff. And you know what's a very, very interesting coincidence is that the province that I live in, Newfoundland, what's their national flower? Or provincial flower, I keep saying national. What's their provincial flower? Let's look at their provincial flower. If it'll load. The pitcher plant, Sericea purpurea, the provincial flower. There it is with its flowers. But yeah, pretty interesting coincidence. I had no idea about that. I knew the pitcher plant, but I didn't know about that. So yeah, a little light of hope there. I mean, there is other options aside from their pharmaceutical options. This is not medical advice, YouTube. Just saying that there's worlds of information out there, and it's out there for the taking, and you can do whatever the hell you want with it. So, with that said, I thank everyone for your time and attention. That's all I had to show for tonight. I thank you so much. And if you have it in you to spare, please consider supporting the channel. It is in need of your aid. I have a Patreon that you can join. I have PayPal. I have cryptocurrencies and whatnot. All the links are in the description. I hope you all have a great week. And just thank you very much. Just thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And that's gonna do it for tonight. Reporting from the brave new world, I am Venominous, and I'll catch you next time.